So my name is Darren Chase, and I'm the library director at the James M. Milne Library in SUNYLA, and I'm the moderator of this session. I'm going to introduce our presenters in a moment, but first I just want to describe a few things about the order of things here during this session. I'll be monitoring chat. Please keep your mic muted during the presentation, and then at the point when the presentation is concluded and it's time for Q&A, unmute just as you're speaking and then mute again. This will help to reduce feedback and unnecessary noise. These sessions are being recorded and I will be monitoring chat. So if you want to participate with comments in chat, I will monitor and read questions and comments from there during the Q&A section. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our speakers. This is creating an OER on the participatory process of policymaking. And our speakers today are Mona Ramonetti, Daniene Byrne, and Raphael Apeaning. Daniene Byrne is a PhD candidate in technology policy and innovation at Stony Brook University. She studies intersections of technology and regulatory governance. She is also a scholarly communication intern at Stony Brook University Libraries. Mona Ramonetti is the head of scholarly communication at Stony Brook University Libraries. She is also the campus OER lead for the Stony Brook University. Mona is the liaison to the life sciences and biomedical engineering departments. She also serves as the chair of the Stony Brook University Libraries Anti-Racism Task Force. Raphael Apeaning is a postdoctoral research fellow at Stony Brook University and is working on modeling energy and climate technology systems with the Institute of Carbon Removal Policy and Law. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, presenters. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And everyone can see it, yes? Good. All right, I will proceed. Welcome all to our presentation on creating an open educational resource on the participatory process of policy making. I am Mona Ramonetti, and yes, I'm the head of scholarly communications at Stony Brook University Libraries, and one of my primary responsibilities is overseeing the open educational resources process and initiative at Stony Brook University. As Darren mentioned, I have two co-presenters, Daniene Byrne, and she is, I'll just add a little bit to what Darren has already said. She's a PhD candidate. She is interested in how stakeholders shape technological policy. Her work explores issues of design, ethics, and equity. And my second co-presenter, Dr. Apeaning, brings expertise in data science and policy. He encouraged us to develop a more robust student perspective and offered to audit our course with a focus on inclusion. So our presentation today tells a story of the nuts and the bolts of how we created an OER course. This is also a story of collaboration, of design, as we envision this course as a small step towards policy justice. I'm trying to advance. There we go. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the origin of the project. So it started in the summer of 2020. Daniene approached the library, and more specifically me, and she was interested in an internship opportunity, more specifically in the scholarly communications arena. So we batted around some ideas, and the open educational resources, or OER, piqued Daniene's interest. And we, as we were talking, I revealed to her that there's a gap in higher level courses, OER courses, across many disciplines, notably in the social sciences. At the time of our various discussions, the events of George Floyd's murder, and all the events that ensued, all of that was happening. And we got to discussing about the sparse contribution of voices from underrepresented groups in the area of policy making. Policies and rules really, they affect all of us. They affect society, and affects a lot of the groups that were being affected, more specifically in the summer, the Black American group, the African American group. So that was helping us to take shape of something as for this, what we wanted to do. And lastly, we identified that a lot of the OER literature out there tends to focus on the end product, the OER itself. And there isn't a lot of literature that discusses the process of how you get to that product. So we wanted to make our contribution to that. So one of the things that we needed to do was to, come up with a process that would work, that it seemed viable for us. So we did some research. We looked around a bit, and we adopted 2 openly available resources: the Stanford D School's Design Thinking Research, and Carl Ulrich's Design Creation of Artifacts in Society. And so we borrowed their ideas to come up with this process. And this process reflects a design thinking approach that recognizes and solves problems, and to create resources such as OER courses. It proceeds clockwise, but at some points you can jump across the steps. As part of the iterative improvement, for instance, if you get new ideas, feedback, you can hop back to maybe refining the goals, with understanding that you have to regroup, and this is not a linear process that just you have to keep going forward. So I'm going to quickly walk you through this process. The first one, recognizing the gaps. So at this stage, what we did was it involves some level of empathy, a knowledge of a situation, or a recognition of a problem, and trying to understand your user's needs. The second step, defining the goals. What does this mean? We have to describe what the problem is and attempt to solve and imagine the solution. Themes and research. It's an attempt to determine the established concepts, identify the ones that you would want to focus your attention on, and then lastly, you try to find resources that can assist you in that. Produce a prototype. We actually worked out a modular system to allow the course to be adoptable and or adaptable. And lastly, testing our work through a pilot and an inclusion audit. So this slide captures the beginning of what we were batting around, and it's the first step in the process, recognizing the gap. And Daniene actually generated this word cloud using a Web of Science data set and BiblioShiny app. And this helped us to identify issues or concepts that we wanted to explore and highlight in the course. And now I am going to pass it off to Daniene.
Oh, thank you, Mona. So Mona and I brought 2 different stakeholder views to finding gaps in this design process. And the view that I really brought was trying to understand the policy process. I study self-driving vehicles and the policies that are made, and I look at the comments, and I also study sort of how administrative lawyers and political scientists look at the system. And what they know, and what becomes obvious when you start reading, is the general public is not involved in this. And the people that will be impacted are not necessarily even aware that the process is going on. We know that from the moment you wake up until the time you go to sleep, regulations influence everything you do. But rarely do we really understand what's going on. And you find that even in government classes like AP Government, they'll talk about the bureaucracy, but the actual method that policymaking is, the way that policymaking occurs with notice and comment rulemaking, very few people really understand that unless they are lobbyists or advocates. So giving students and the general public this kind of a skill through an OER was something I became very excited about. And when Mona suggested that we could offer an OER, it was just, for me, wonderful. So I'm just going to read a few quotes from some rulemaking scholars. Farina and Newhart noted 3 major barriers to broad participation: lack of awareness, low participation literacy, and information overload. So not only is there a lack of participation, the voices that do tend to work with policymakers are most likely to be lobbyists. Kerwin and Furlong have pointed out that citizens must know not only when a regulation is being formulated, but also how and when to effectively participate. And so that's what this course really tries to get to. Let me see. So I'm going to pass this on to Dr. Apeaning, and he's going to talk about another gap.
Thank you, Daniene. So Daniene actually invited me because, I mean, she discussed the idea with me, and I kept on asking questions about how about the student's perspective. I think it was a really, I mean, I found the course very interesting, but then being an adjunct professor, right? One of the things I kept asking was, what will make students take this course, right? So we started by brainstorming about the needs of students. And we know that the needs of students are very diverse, right? It depends on their interests and a whole lot of other facets. So we recognize that one of the missing gaps in the design process was trying to design a course that caters for our potential audience, that's students, right? I mean, trying to incorporate ideas or skills that might be useful in a job market. So we decided to design a course in such a way that it's project-based, and students come out not only with the knowledge of understanding the process of policy, but then they also come out with skills that they can use to, I mean, elicit knowledge and apply it to their own jobs. Yeah. So, for example, one thing you can see here is the visualization graph Daniene created. And these we encourage, I mean, the class is designed in such a way that you build a portfolio. So you start with simple ideas, and then you build a portfolio with data science, yeah, and with data tools out there. So one thing we envision is that students can use these products as a way of marketing, right, in a job fair. So for example, in a job fair, for example, you can put a link to your portfolio, to your potential, and then your potential employer can access this and then exhibit some of the skills you can do. So Daniene, back to you.
Actually, we're going to proceed with defining the goals. So yes, we're following that structure with identifying the gaps. So this image actually is an engraving depicting fortitude and justice. Fortitude holds the column and justice points the way. And this was created by Franco Batista. And this sort of captured where we were at this stage. We agreed that the overarching theme of the course would be to promote social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And that we, both in this course, the structure of it being openly accessible, we could accomplish it that way, and the course pedagogy, which would be student-centered. We also wanted the course to serve as a jumping off point and resource for other instructors interested in aspects of the content, of the course content. So we set the goal of preparing a course on data science and rulemaking policy and how to make a fully accessible OER. The course would serve all our needs and provide a learning experience that supported a student's potential for lifelong policy input and awareness. And we also wanted to document the process and to share it, just like what we're doing right now in a conference or a paper. I'll pass it off to Daniene right now.
Okay, so this Italian landscape with umbrella pines sort of gives you the beginning of our research. We know our goals. We have our we've worked out our main points, and so we're starting to explore. And I needed to look at what OERs are out there, and also what other materials are out there. And it sort of went from a very kind of controlled landscape of OERs to sort of getting deeper into the woods as far as all the different materials that we were able to get for students to access. And I'm going to describe some of them here. So let me see. Of course, as the research proceeded, the course started to take shape and things started to change. And we continually had these goals, conversations, and revisited things. We did want to emphasize, especially after Raphael came in, he said, let's get the main themes down. That various views will enhance policy justice, that understanding promotes input, that students can take text and use it as data, and that visualizations can inform policymakers. So those were some major skills. And then going into the resources, actually, Mona, I needed to ask you, I'm advancing slides over here. So these are the themes. And then if you go one more slide, this is an open courseware resource, American Government book by Rice University. And we use chapter 15 on the bureaucracy. Even here, where we get into an open resource covering government issues, it doesn't explain the rulemaking process. So this gives us some background, and it's an available resource, but we had to go much deeper with the resources. Next slide, please. So because we are teaching a federal process, these federal government websites were very important. The process can be simplified into these 3 steps. A policy is proposed through a notice. The public is given a time to comment, and then the final policy is supposed to take into account comments. In fact, if it doesn't take into account comments, there could be a lawsuit. When the policy is finalized, you can take it to the Justice Department, and they will assess, was something major missing. So the way that we learn about what policies are available to comment on is through the federal newspaper, which is on the left. This is the Federal Register. So the students learn where this is, how to find it, how to use it. And then when they see policies they're interested in, they learn how to go to regulations.gov, which you see on the right. And this offers something called a docket, which has all the policy materials in it and allows them to have a place to comment when they've prepared it. And I'll take the next slide. Okay, this course is really enriched by free available materials, such as these 3 books. Data Feminism, this work provided huge inspiration. The first 2 chapters specifically talk about power structures and speaking truth to power. And this book is free online through MIT Press. And it has an emphasis on how to use simple approaches to gathering data that's very relevant to you. And I think this is a really key library issue, because libraries provide information. And if people know the right way to gather information and prepare data, they can make change. So that's what that book emphasizes. This text mining with R. R is an open source method of coding, and this gives students all the tools that they would need for simple use to use text mining to look at things like abstracts, grant proposals, other people's comments, and to look at the policies themselves from more of a quantitative view. And the final book is about speaking science to policymakers, and that's through the national academies. And I'll take the next slide. This is also just an example of another book we use. Chapter 6 is about data and ethics, but connected with this book, which is all these resources are free on GitHub, are many, many other syllabi from courses that use it. And these, for me, were learning resources in learning how to best teach this course. I'll take the next slide. Okay, this book, Regulation: A Primer, is a very thin, very easy introduction to all the steps you need. And it's really a key foundational book for our class in terms of what the regulatory process, how students would understand that. This book is not offered free online. It's under copyright. And it is under American University. You can go to a link and you can open it, but we didn't feel comfortable using that in an OER. So we reached out to the authors and asked permission. And I was very nervous doing this, but it turned out that they were very happy to give us permission to use it here. And they were very encouraging about the course theme in general, because they want more people to understand the policy process. Another author we reached out to is Carrie Congolese, and he created this much more realistic reality of rulemaking graphic, which we are using in the course. And that just gives you kind of an idea of the contrast when you get deeper into the process. And I'll take the next slide, Mona. And we also reached out to Susan Webb-Yackey. And you're looking here at sort of our class platform. She also gave us permission to use her video where she describes things. Another video we use in the class is just a little 4-minute introduction that's in the government website. And I'll take the next slide. Let's see. Oh, okay. Then, and this is where I was talking about getting into the woods. We were finding, as we started to look for data for students to use, these great data resources that had data dashboards already built in. And we realized that this is a great way to introduce students to visualizations without having them to need to do all the coding to begin with. And they can use these dashboards by putting in their own policy topics that they care about. So this one is part of the Comparative Agendas project. And so I just quickly looked at the moods on immigration, and you can see there's a drop-down menu, and you can get a timetable of how people were responding. So this helps them with their particular issue to look more deeply. And the next slide. This is another pretty cool website, OpenSecrets. It's all about the funding behind policies. And so it gives you many tools, and behind them are data sets. And I looked at the automotive industry just to see generally how much was spent. And you see 70 million was spent on lobbying in 2017. So a student may see very few public comments, lots of industry comments, but still not understand what's going on. And this helps them see the money side. Okay, I think it's on to you, Mona.
Thank you, Daniene. So, and ideally, we wanted to use resources that were exclusively openly accessible. But as some of you know, sometimes that's just not possible. So our workaround was to make resources, these types of resources, supplemental readings or exercises. So one such example was the use of the databases, the Roper Center, Web of Science, and Nexus Uni. They were accessible via the university library subscription and open to the Stony Brook University community, but this was not required. This was supplemental. And it gave the students some exposure into how they can work with the data. And how we actually did this was, traditionally we have a one-shot library instruction class, but we thought we would, for this particular course, we would embed mini instructional videos on how to navigate these particular databases and others as well within the course work when suitable. And the software we use to do this, and we're still in the process of doing it, is Descript, which it was very attractive to us because it has transcriptional capabilities, and that helps with accessibility, which is also a major consideration for us as we developed this OER. Go ahead, Daniene.
Okay, so now we have all these materials and we begin to put them together. And this Lois Laffin photograph is from, I think, early 1908, I think. And they are all doing various things to put this course together as we were. So we had to build a syllabus and populate a template. In fact, we needed a syllabus to get IT to give us the Blackboard platform that we use generally to share classes in Stony Brook. So we had to put everything into a sequence, and that got a little bit intense because there's a lot of different themes we were pulling from. And I would call it construction and curation. We needed to design it asynchronously so that if we designed a class at Stony Brook, we would still be able to test it or get the feeling for people that might be taking it without having an instructor right there leading. And it did occur to me that if this is an OER, I would recommend that students do it in pairs so that they could give each other feedback. So we really did this initially for 16 weeks, and we thought of it as a learning gateway. And the idea being that they would move in confidence from lower to higher level skills, and each assignment will build a portfolio. If you go to the next slide, this is just an example on the next slide of how our modules looked. And we ended up having many modules for both data science and content. And the next slide, please. We also use this accessibility report within Blackboard, which allowed us to see how accessible our visual content was to people that might need screen readers. And this shows we have a few more things to work on, but we're getting close to 100% accessibility. The next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the next phase. We had the prototype. Now we talked about piloting it. And this is our way of sending a test balloon, hence the balloon. Another photograph, this one from the Rijksmuseum. So the best option, this is the best option, student input, but this also required a lot of work within the university, specifically working with the technology and society department, working with curriculum committees, selling our course first to administrators and then to students to ensure that we get enough enrollment. And at the same time, scrambling to make a course and compress all these 16 weeks of modules into 6 weeks. The compression of the modules worked by, as you can see, we have in week 1, 5 modules, 3 just related to content and 2 to data science. And I'm going to pass it on to Raphael now, because it turned out our test pilot course didn't happen because we didn't happen yet. We still are going to do it, but we just didn't have the enrollment. So we were able to do an audit. So.
Yeah, as my co-presenters have mentioned, I actually came in to help with evaluating and auditing the course, from an inclusive point of view. And we began by, brainstorming about what is what is important when it comes to inclusiveness. And we decided to go with the social inclusion framework, which was originally proposed by Gödel and then later used in the context of OER by Areto. And as the visualization shows, the process started as a bottom-up approach where we started with thinking really hard about inclusion from an empowerment point of view, right? Will this thinking about it in terms of what is the theme of the class and what is its contribution. Yeah, and social justice was one of the key things. Yeah. And then moving a step up, we also thought about the next step was to consider how do we deliver this class, right? So we decided to kind of source multidisciplinary perspectives to also foster, collaborative learning among students, yeah, by using project-based and also teaching them how to get skills, yeah. And then lastly, as Daniene pointed out, we also made sure all our materials on our Blackboard are accessible. Yeah. And so in the next slide, please, yeah. The next slide gives an exhaustive checklist, what we used in the design, and we also intend to use in terms of evaluating the class. Like, so one thing we will do at the beginning of every class is use facets of this to kind of get students' perspective about, where they stand, their knowledge of inclusiveness. And then at the end of the course, we'll also evaluate their understanding about the course, and then also evaluate their inclusiveness, like the pedagogy, like whether the course content fits, whether we meet the inclusion checklist. So as you can see, in terms of empowerment, some of the critical questions we are really interested in is, does the student learn a lifelong skill about citizenship and participatory democracy? And I think Daniene and Mona have done a good job of highlighting these core principles. Yeah. And then in the process of creating, we actually, so this is a collaborative process, right? I come with skills. Daniene is an expert in the process of policy making. And Mona, she was more or less, she managed the whole project. But then she also came in, she brought in a lot of expertise about accessibility, OER, and then she gave us a good sense of how to navigate the theme of empowerment. Yeah. And then in terms of participation, as I mentioned, most of the material in the class is project-based and is designed in a cumulative way. So students come out, and we also encourage discussions among students and sharing of ideas. Yeah. And then the accessibility part of it, we look at general things that have to do with access to data. We make sure all the data we use in illustrative examples are public data. Yeah. And in some instances, we actually clean the data and make it usable. Yeah. So I think I'm done here, but this is an exhaustive checklist, and we're still building on it. So if you have anything to add to it, we'll really appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, can I just add one thing?
Yeah,
we have that pyramid because if you look at access, participation, and empowerment, each one makes the course more inclusive. You need the access first, the participation, then it allows the participation, and then you can do something that's really empowering. So it's like nested levels. And it's a little confusing whether we put that upside down or right side up, because it's increasing as you go down the pyramid.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so up until this point in the presentation, we've demonstrated the back end of getting the resources and shaping the course. But there's also another part of the back end process that we would like to share with you as well, and that is the collaborative part. So this image by Jacques Stella of 5 men pushing a block of stone, we thought was apropos to describe the collaborative effort that went into creating this OER. And again, the design process is still at the forefront. So I'll start with the gaps. The course concept, it arose from connection. Daniene and I sitting down and discussing what we wanted to do. And Daniene, I mean, she needed to fulfill an internship requirement, but she also wanted to combine her interest in data and policies and the libraries. I wanted us to contribute to contributing an OER, quality OER at a high level, to help fill in that gap. So we had identified what we wanted to do, but the fact of the matter is we couldn't exist in a vacuum. We needed to get approvals for this idea that we thought was wonderful. So we had to reach out to our respective deans. I reached out to our library dean, and he happily approved it. Daniene's dissertation advisor, who happens to be the chair of Tech and Society, she also had to reach out to him to get his approval, which she did. And the fellowship that she was working with under the Institute of Advanced Computational Science, a program called STRIDE, she also had to get approval for the internship and the topic. So here we are again. We thought it was just the two of us, but we had a number of different folks that we had to pull in, and that is in the beginning stages. And in terms of setting the goals, as the course theme coalesced, we realized the value of those who had created freely available texts and courses ahead of us. Some of this collaboration was asynchronous and virtual, and we are grateful for those who made such high quality available resources. But we also wanted to make sure that we captured our themes, inclusion, the path to policy justice through understanding the process, using text as data to communicate with rulemakers. So what does that mean in terms of pulling in someone? We had to look at our university diversity plan to see if we were in alignment with anything that was part of the plan. That is still very much in the works, but again, we did not want to exist in a vacuum with regard to what we were trying to do. The prototype. And as we began to take research notes, we shared it on GitHub, and we're working out this prototype, but we also needed to make sure that we got this module, this course up. Where were we going to put it? So we had to reach out to CELT, our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, and they had to create a course template for us, which required a preliminary syllabus. So we had to knock that out as well. And also, as the class started to take shape, or the course started to take shape, we needed to reach out to key authors, like Daniene had referenced and had mentioned, who did not have openly available source materials, and we had to ask them, were you interested in sharing this with the understanding that this was going to be openly available? And we got very lucky, we really did. And lastly, the pilot, and that turned out to be where we're working with a lot of university bureaucracy, and there were lots of steps that we didn't know we had to consider. And as we went through the process, happily and unhappily, we found there were challenges along the way. We had the curriculum committees that we had to contend with, Arts and Sciences, School of Engineering, within the Department of Tech and Society. Ideally, we were hoping to have this course up in the fall, but that would have taken a long time for it to have passed through the curriculum committees. And so our consolation was to have it as a summer session, 6 weeks, as Daniene had mentioned previously. And so we got that through, and lo and behold, it was late in the process of registration and marketing and promoting, and so we didn't get the students that we needed to run this course. But we were undeterred. Our hope is to get it in the fall and possibly in the spring of next year. So and so our audit was a little bit. It didn't go the way that we had envisioned, because we wanted the feedback from the students. But happily, Raphael was able to step up and give us some feedback on that. Okay. So our takeaways, and this image is from Fitzhenry Lane, and it's the harbor of Boston with the city in the distance. And it just, we're still on the journey. We're getting there. We're approaching the city. So we want to talk about some of the takeaways that we had, and just let me make sure I'm around time here. Starting from scratch, working with the available resources was great. It actually was, because it actually helped us to see what we already had, what the library already had. And so it helped to focus, to provide some focus on a way to showcase some of the library's resources. Collaboration, as I just mentioned in the previous slide, very, very important. Admin support is critical. Funding also helps. And also, remember to keep everybody in the loop, because there's so many people that are coming in at different stages. You have to make sure that everybody knows what's going on as best as you can. And feedback, gather feedback and iterate when necessary. Inclusivity matters. Design a course that piques the students' interest and real-world applicability. Be willing to be flexible and try to conceive of workarounds whenever possible. Be your own advocate. Nobody else is going to do it for you. And ask. One of our biggest successes of this was the number of individuals who were happy to share their materials that were not openly available to us on this platform, which is openly available. Many of them saw the value of what we were doing and were interested in the finished product. Some of them are interested in using some parts of the module. And that is the end of the presentation, but we would like to say our thank yous. It's a long list, so I'm going to rattle it down very quickly. The Stride Fellowship Program, Stony Brook University Libraries, Stony Brook Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching and Learning, Stony Brook University's College of Engineering and Applied Sciences, Department of Tech and Society. And for the individuals who share their content with us, Susan Dudley, Jeffrey Brito, Andrew Emery, Carrie Coglianese, Susan Webb-Yaki, and to Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren Klein for inspiring this all. And that is where we are. Thank you for your attention, and we love to hear any questions that you might have. Hopefully we have the answers to them. Thanks.
Thank you. So there's a question here on chat. I'll read it. What sort of license did you negotiate? And this is from Casey Coons. What sort of license did you negotiate with the non-open access sources? Are they now available to students and faculty outside of the course?
I guess I'll answer that. We asked them by email. I would say they're not available outside of the course. This was in the course context of the OER that we negotiated this. And it was pretty informal. I sent them a letter about what we were trying to do and why we wanted to use their materials. In one case, someone had their editor get back to me, and the editor said they were trying an experiment this year and opening access for everything. So all the journals entries were available. So I guess if this course were going to run a long time, we might have to revisit on some of the access because it might change.
Thank you. Here is a comment and question from Jennifer Jensen. Great project and presentation. Is the course available anywhere outside of Stony Brook's Blackboard?
We will be putting it up. We still have the finishing touches to put on it, but we will be putting it up on our academic commons. And that, yes, then it would be freely available for anyone to access.
Great. Here's another question. Is the course available for credit?
That's what's taking so much time with the committees and all the applications. And yeah, basically have two things that we might have done when we tried to run it. We're having the the students' advisors know more specifically about this course and guide them into it. And also within the syllabus mentioning which course requirements our course would cover so that students would take it. But the idea would be, yes, definitely teach it for credit so that then that's a pilot before we put it out there to the world.
You know, I had some questions about that, about the design of the course and the design of the OER. And this was woven through your entire presentation. Great presentation, by the way. I would just want to say thank you all. Did you know from the start that you wanted to design a course and an OER together? Was there ever a time when you thought, well, I just want to design a course, or this could be an OER, but not a course? I mean, it's such an impressive undertaking to do the course and the OER.
I don't think I realized that it would have been better to have a course before saying, yeah, sure, I'll design an OER, we can do this. But it ended up that you really need the course first before you have the OER as that pilot. But I think if I'm honest, and Mona, you can weigh in, I think it was really about just going straight to the OER, but then we realized you can't just do that, you know.
I also wanted to add, when I came in, it was, I mean, the initial idea was an OER, but then we decided we needed feedback, like to make it inclusive, we needed feedback. So we decided to pilot it as a course, get some feedback, and then modify the OER before we put it out there. So it's more of a reinforcement, like a back and forth process here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
I also want to add, like, Daniene, you missed this out. Daniene actually taught it as at a Y. So it started as a course. The idea started as a course, then it became an OER. Then we decided to make it a course. Yeah. So it's
yeah, I taught a few segments of it in a WISE as a STEM-wise introduction to my own research. So it was very much based on my own research. But that was the seed to the
right. And I think I think when we were conceiving of this, yes, the OER was the primary focus at that point. But I think in the back of our minds, we had an idea that this was not going to be a small task. And so we decided, normally the internships are a semester long, and we decided we needed more than just that. So, and that's one of the things we had to run by our dean, that this would be a year-long task. And so I think on some level we knew it in our mind's eyes, that we knew that this was not a flash in the pan kind of thing. This was going to take some effort.
Yeah, and I'll add to that my advisor, because I'm working on my dissertation, was kind of like, focus on your dissertation. And that sort of created a conflict because I needed his support with his department chair hat to make sure that these people would register kids for this course. And yeah, so.
Here's a question from Mark McBride. I'm curious if you considered a different approach to teaching materials or developing assignments due to the flexibility of the OER.
You know, there's probably much more that I could learn in this area. My experience is from MOOCs. I took about 9 MOOCs before I decided I loved learning and I was going to go to grad school. And in those courses, it's so much about fellow student feedback and making your own content. So I did have that going on, but I'm not sure in an OER when students are alone taking this. I don't know. I mean, maybe you could maybe someone could offer some suggestions.
You know, I think we did initially, Daniene, if I remember correctly, we did bat around a few ideas in terms of trying to make it more interactive and dynamic, but reality actually set in. And that started to limit us in terms of how we wanted to deliver the materials. There was discussion, but and I think what you just mentioned, we wanted to have it where there was more a collaborative work amongst the students, and it still lends itself to it to some degree, but it did not become the primary or a huge focus as the course went on.
Mona, you had mentioned in the takeaways at the end of the presentation that funding helps. Did you receive funding?
No, we did not. But I think one of the things that the challenges, and Daniene, maybe you can speak to it a bit also, was what the challenges was getting the course approved or through the pipeline was, well, who's going to teach it and who was going to pay the person who's going to teach it. So Daniene, if you want to expand on that as well, go on ahead.
Yeah, well, that's the second dimension. The first dimension is who's going to make it. And I made it, and I worked for free for the library, but I was on a full fellowship from Stride, and that fellowship meant I had to do an internship. So I've been paid throughout the year as I worked on this. If I didn't have that internship requirement, I would not have done this, even though I feel passionate about the subject. And I just to go back to the other question, the whole course, especially the 6-week, is project-based. So it is about responding to each other's work and sharing and collaborating. But I don't know exactly how that translates to an OER.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to. I'm interested to hear you say that, and I'm recalling that you had mentioned at one point that you conceived of students, ideally conceived of students going through the course in pairs to provide support for each other and a kind of dynamic experience and kind of bringing a kind of dynamic energy to their experience of moving through the course. And that just got my attention. I just thought that was a really interesting remark that you had a sense of that being an ideal or a constructive experience for students. How did you arrive at that?
Well, since you're librarians, maybe you'll appreciate that I'm a huge genealogy person. And when you go to work on this stuff and you find things, then you're next to somebody else and you find out about their family and you go back and forth and you generate this excitement about what you're doing. And in the same way, I imagine the students working on different kinds of policies, but sharing like, oh, look, I found this website on funding. Most of the materials in the class let them go down their own different research paths, but it's still a shared experience. So they're not cheating by helping each other and by guiding each other, you know, and it's like, so it's when you figure out, oh my God, there's fold 3 and there's military records here. And look what I found out, you know, in the similar way, the students do this as they move through this class. I mean, for me, this is the way that learning should happen. I hate tests. I think online tests are ridiculous. So,
do you plan to deliver a synchronous version of this course?
It would have to happen after I hand in my dissertation. Possibly the earliest would be in the spring. Like Mona said, funding is an issue. Like all the departments, you know, I'm not a full-time faculty, I'm just a grad student. So finding that line, and I'm actually trying to apply for a new grant to get funding for me to teach this class. Because I put this much work in, I may as well.
Absolutely. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing it when it's the OER when it's available on Academic Commons. Other questions or comments for the presenters? a comment. This was excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Another comment. This is such a great project. A thank you also. And so thank you. This was a tremendous lift. That's a good observation. Maybe I have one more question since we have the time. I was wondering, and you addressed this in the takeaways, I think, really, effectively. So maybe it's probably a redundant question on my part, but I'm going to ask it anyways since we have a little time, and I'm interested to hear your answers. What would you emphasize as key for success to other instructors and librarians who would undertake an OER creation project for a course?
I would say choosing a topic that has a diversity of available materials out there that will allow you to pull different themes in, but they're free materials.
Yeah, and also I think I'd like to add to that where it should be something that is of interest, that has some real world applicability. I know we have to go as students, you go through, you have to take some required courses, but something like this, I think it not only does it inform, but it also gives you a sense of knowing what is happening outside in the world and not just within your sphere, and how you can contribute. So if you're thinking about something along lines of what we've done, I think the biggest attraction is how people can relate to what it is that you're trying to present to them, and how it can impact them on an individual level or as a society. I know it sounds very Pollyanna what I'm saying, but just the idea of having a voice and knowing part of the process, maybe not the whole process, but having a voice, I think is attractive also. But in terms of just an OER itself, having that, the collaboration is incredible. And I think it applies in not just in academia. It's just you have to know how to work with people, to navigate certain difficult circumstances and challenges, and not to give up, to persevere and find workarounds. That's really, I think, when we found a few workarounds, it was eureka. It was just a moment to pop open a bottle of champagne and have a good time for a few minutes. But really, it is the people skills and the collaboration is very, very important. And I think it's at the top of the list.
So there's just some more comments. Thank you for presenting, inspiring. Good luck wrapping up the dissertation, Daniene. Thank you, very informative. So we're near the 11:15 mark, and if there are no other questions and comments, I'd just say, one more big thanks to our presenters. It was such an excellent session, and I think,
thank you, Darren.
yeah, my
Thanks,
job is
everyone.
done.
Yes, thank you all.
Nice to see you virtually. Sure.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, signing off. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.